In the 1950s, these dinners decided what American families ate, how they gathered, and what a proper evening looked like. They came straight from Betty Crocker cookbooks and landed on millions of tables without question. Tonight, almost nobody makes them. Not because they failed, but because the world around them changed. These were not trendy meals. They were dependable, affordable, and expected. Each one tells a story about post-war life, changing kitchens, and how dinner once held families together. If you stop watching now, you miss why these recipes vanished and what disappeared with them. Stay with this video, because these meals explain an America most people no longer remember. Ham loaf. Before meatloaf became a beef-only habit, American dinners looked very different. Ham loaf was one of the most trusted meals in 1950s Betty Crocker kitchens, especially in the Midwest and Northeast. It was not a novelty. It was a plan. Ham loaf combined ground ham with ground pork, breadcrumbs, eggs, and milk, then baked slowly and finished with a sweet glaze made from brown sugar and mustard. The result was firm, sliceable, and meant to stretch. One loaf fed a family, and leftovers fed another day. This mattered in a decade still shaped by wartime habits and careful budgeting. Canned and cured ham were reliable. They kept well, cost less than fresh cuts, and fit the new rhythm of grocery shopping. Ham loaf fit the era perfectly. It felt familiar, tasted comforting, and looked respectable on the table. Served with scalloped potatoes or green beans, it signaled that dinner had been handled. Children remembered the sweetness. Adults remembered the ease. What made ham loaf powerful was not flavor alone, but dependability. It worked every time. Over the years, fresh beef became cheaper, tastes shifted, and sweet glazes fell out of favor. Ham loaf faded without ceremony. But this dish explains how American cooking once balanced thrift, routine, and pride. It was never meant to impress guests. It was meant to take care of people. And that is why it deserves to be remembered. Chicken a la king. Chicken a la king once represented elegance without excess. In the 1950s, it appeared in Betty Crocker dinners as proof that a weekday meal could still feel special. It was creamy, orderly, and reassuring. The dish relied on cooked chicken, milk, butter, and flour, often finished with mushrooms or pimentos. Everything was cut small, blended carefully, and served over toast, rice, or biscuits. There was no drama on the plate. The value came from balance and presentation. Chicken a la king fit perfectly into post-war kitchens. Leftover chicken could be reused. The sauce stretched small portions into full meals. It worked for families and for guests. It felt refined without being foreign. For many households, this was the closest thing to restaurant dining at home. The recipe mattered because it matched the mood of the era. Americans wanted comfort, order, and a sense of progress. Cream sauces and neat portions signaled control. Dinner felt calm, predictable. Over time, heavy white sauces fell out of favor. Faster meals replaced plated suppers. Chicken a la king slowly left the table, remembered more as a name than a meal. But its disappearance marked a shift. It showed when dinner stopped being an event and became a task. This dish reminds us that food once carried quiet ambition, even on an ordinary night. Salmon wiggle. Salmon wiggle was never meant to sound elegant. It was meant to work. In the 1950s, this dish appeared in Betty Crocker kitchens as a dependable answer to the question of dinner. The recipe used canned salmon, milk, butter, flour, and peas, stirred into a thick white sauce and served over noodles or toast. Everything came from the pantry. Nothing required last-minute shopping. That reliability made salmon wiggle valuable. Canned salmon carried protein, shelf life, and affordability. It allowed families to eat well without relying on fresh meat. The sauce softened strong flavors. The peas added color and balance. Served hot, It filled plates and satisfied hunger. Salmon wiggle reflected the rhythm of post-war life. Families needed meals that could be made quickly after work, but still felt complete. This dish delivered structure. It was predictable, filling, and easy to repeat week after week. Children often remembered the texture more than the taste. Adults remembered how far one could stretch. Over time, canned fish lost favor, and cream-based suppers felt dated. Salmon wiggle disappeared quietly. Its loss marked a change in how Americans valued pantry cooking. This meal reminds us that dinner once relied on planning, not impulse. It was not about excitement. It was about making sure everyone ate. Spanish rice with frankfurters. Spanish rice with frankfurters was built for practicality, not tradition. In 1950s Betty Crocker kitchens, this dish turned basic pantry items into a full dinner without waste. Rice, canned tomatoes, onions, and sliced frankfurters simmered together in one pot. The color felt bold. The flavor felt familiar. Nothing was truly Spanish. The name suggested excitement at a time when American cooking stayed cautious. Frankfurters were affordable, shelf-stable, and already trusted by families. Rice stretched small amounts of meat into generous portions. One pot fed everyone and left little to clean. That efficiency mattered in homes balancing work, children, and routine. This meal reflected how Americans defined variety in the post-war years. It offered something different without risk. Over time, processed meats lost favor and expectations for authenticity changed. Spanish rice with frankfurters faded from dinner tables. Its disappearance shows when simplicity stopped being enough. This dish reminds us that dinner once prioritized fullness, warmth, and certainty over labels or trends. Beef stroganoff. Beef stroganoff entered 1950s American kitchens as a safe idea of foreign food. In Betty Crocker dinners, it was softened, simplified, and made familiar. Thin strips of beef were cooked quickly, then folded into a mild sauce made from sour cream or canned soup. Onions added sweetness. The dish was usually served over noodles or rice, turning a small amount of meat into a full meal. Nothing about it challenged the palate. That was the point. This version of beef stroganoff reflected American confidence with limits. Families wanted variety, but only within comfort. The dish sounded international, yet tasted reassuring. It felt modern without feeling risky. As global flavors became more authentic and expectations changed, this restrained version lost its place. The name remained, but the recipe did not. Its disappearance marks a moment when American cooking moved from careful imitation to curiosity. This dish shows how dinner once balanced ambition with restraint, one plate at a time. Tuna noodle casserole. Tuna noodle casserole was not optional in 1950s kitchens. It was a standard. In Betty Crocker dinners, it solved cost, time, and certainty in one dish. The recipe combined canned tuna, egg noodles, milk or condensed soup, and a simple topping of buttered crumbs or crushed crackers. Everything baked together into a firm, sliceable meal. One pan fed a family and promised leftovers. Canned tuna was affordable, dependable, and widely available. Noodles stretched protein without complaint. The casserole format mattered. It held heat, traveled well, and waited patiently for everyone to sit down. Dinner felt organized. This dish reflected how families ate during a period of structure. Meals were planned. Portions were shared. Seconds were expected. The casserole made that possible. As tastes shifted and one-pan dinners lost favor, tuna noodle casserole became shorthand for the past. It was mocked, then abandoned. What disappeared was not just a recipe. It was the idea that dinner should be steady, repeatable, and built to care for everyone at once. Porcupine meatballs. Porcupine meatballs earned their name from appearance, not humor. In 1950s Betty Crocker dinners, Rice pushed through the surface of the meat as it cooked, giving the dish its unmistakable look. The recipe mixed ground beef with uncooked rice, onion, and seasoning, then simmered the meatballs in tomato sauce. As the rice expanded, it stretched the meat and thickened the meal. One pot produced dinner and sauce together. This dish mattered because it made meat go further. Rice was inexpensive and filling. Families could serve generous portions without increasing cost. Children noticed the texture. Adults noticed the savings. Porcupine meatballs fit the post-war mindset. Nothing was wasted. Every ingredient had a purpose. The meal felt complete without excess. As fresh meat became more affordable and expectations changed, rice-filled meatballs fell out of favor. The name lingered longer than the recipe. This dish reminds us that creativity in the kitchen once came from necessity. Dinner was built to endure, not to impress. Creamed chipped beef on toast. Creamed chipped beef on toast was never designed to be remembered fondly. In 1950s Betty Crocker kitchens, it existed to solve a problem. Dinner needed to be filling, affordable, and dependable even when fresh meat was scarce or expensive. The dish began with dried beef, thinly sliced and heavily salted for preservation. It was soaked briefly to remove excess salt, then chopped and folded into a thick white sauce made from milk, butter, and flour. The mixture was spooned generously over toasted bread and served immediately. No garnish was required. No sides were expected. The plate arrived complete. This meal mattered because dried beef kept well. It could sit in a pantry without refrigeration and still provide protein. The sauce stretched small portions into hearty servings. Toast replaced potatoes or noodles when budgets were tight. Every choice reflected restraint and planning. Creamed chipped beef appeared often in households shaped by wartime habits and military life. It rewarded precision and patience. Cook it too thin and it failed. Cook it correctly and it fed everyone. Children remembered the saltiness. Adults remembered the relief of having dinner handled. As supermarkets expanded and convenience foods multiplied, this dish lost its place. Heavy white sauces fell out of favor. Preservation foods became unnecessary. What once felt practical began to feel outdated. But this recipe explains how American dinners once worked. Food carried responsibility. Meals were built to endure uncertainty and provide reassurance. Creamed chipped beef on toast was never about pleasure. It was about care. Its disappearance marks the moment when dinner stopped being about survival and became about preference. Remembering it helps explain what families once needed from the table and why simplicity once mattered so much. It served quietly, without praise, asking only that everyone left the table satisfied and cared for. Scalloped turkey. Scalloped turkey was a solution for post-holiday kitchens, turning leftovers into a new dinner without waste. In 1950s Betty Crocker cookbooks, it appeared as a practical, economical way to stretch one roast turkey across multiple meals. The dish combined diced or shredded cooked turkey with sliced potatoes, milk, butter, and flour to create a creamy, layered casserole. Often, a light sprinkle of cheese or breadcrumbs topped the dish, baked until bubbling and golden. The goal was not showmanship. It was to transform leftovers into something fresh, filling, and hot. Scalloped turkey mattered because it solved a very real problem. Turkey was expensive, and families needed to feed everyone while avoiding waste. By combining simple ingredients, one meal became 2 or 3. It allowed cooks to maintain appearances of abundance without overspending or overworking. This casserole also reflected post-war American values. Meals were structured and predictable. Convenience existed only within planning. Families wanted reassurance that dinner would satisfy, no matter the season or budget. The layering method and creamy sauce made the dish seem intentional, not just leftover repurposed. Over time, as convenience foods multiplied and roasted turkeys were no longer weekly staples, scalloped turkey faded from home menus. Its disappearance reflects a shift in how Americans approached leftovers, turning practicality into forgetfulness. Yet this recipe illustrates an important truth: food once carried intention. It was not only nourishment but care. Each layer, each creamy bite, represented thoughtfulness, frugality, and rhythm in the kitchen. Remembering scalloped turkey is more than nostalgia. It shows how meals were once designed to extend value, conserve resources, and keep families connected through shared effort. Its quiet presence at the table speaks to an era when dinner was both practical and meaningful.